The skylight leak versus roof leak diagnosis. How to tell the difference. A homeowner just spent $1,500 replacing their skylight last month. 3 weeks later, it's still leaking. The contractor who sold them the replacement is not returning their calls. Here's the thing. I see this exact scenario at least twice a month in New Jersey, and many of these cases, the skylight was never the problem to begin with. Let me explain what's really happening here. Water enters at the failure point somewhere on your roof, but it doesn't drop straight down as most people assume. Instead, it travels along your rafters and roof sheathing, sometimes 6 feet or more, before it emerges at the lowest point or the first opening, which is often right near your skylight. This creates a false impression that the skylight is the source of the leak. This is important because homeowners are wasting thousands of dollars on the wrong repairs. And while they're dealing with that unnecessary skylight replacement, the real leak continues, causing damage. I've been diagnosing roof and skylight leaks for over 2 decades here in New Jersey, and I can tell you that the obvious answer is usually the wrong answer when it comes to water intrusion. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to determine whether your leak is actually coming from your skylight or from somewhere else entirely. More importantly, you'll understand the diagnostic process that could save you thousands in unnecessary repairs and prevent the cascade of damage that happens when water keeps finding its way into your home. Water doesn't leak where you think it does. The travel pattern deception. Here's what you need to know about water behavior. It's deceptive. Water enters at the failure point, but it doesn't drop straight down into your living space. Think of it like a river finding the path of least resistance. Once water gets past your shingles, it hits the roof sheathing and starts traveling. It follows along rafters, slides down underside of your roof deck, and eventually emerges at the weakest point it can find. And where is the weakest point in many roof structures? Right around your skylight, because that's where we've created an opening in the roof plane. Just last month, I had a homeowner in Old Bridge who was absolutely convinced their skylight was leaking. Water is dripping right next to the frame, staining the drywall, and every time it rained, they'd see more water. They had already gotten 2 quotes for skylight replacement, one for $1,800 and another for $2,200. They called me for a third opinion before pulling the trigger. We went up into the attic during a rainstorm, and I traced that water back through the roof structure. The actual entry point was 6 feet upslope from the skylight, where some damaged shingles were letting water in. The water was traveling along a rafter and using the skylight area as its entry point. The skylight itself was perfectly fine. It was just the messenger, not the problem. This means that when you see water stains or dripping near your skylight, you're seeing the end of the journey, not the beginning. It's like blaming the overwhelmed storm drain for causing the flood when the real problem is a broken pipe down the street. The storm drain is just doing its job, but it's not the source. What this tells us is that a visual diagnosis alone is almost worthless when it comes to leak detection. You can't just look at where water appears and assume that's where it's entering. You need a systematic approach to trace the water path backward to find the real source, and that's exactly what we're going to cover next. The diagnostic process that separates real professionals from guessers. Let me explain the systematic approach that actually works. The key is to test specific areas separately rather than just hosing down the entire roof and hoping to recreate the leak. This is what separates a professional diagnosis from expensive guesswork. First, we isolate the skylight itself. We will inspect the counter flashing and the step flashing around the skylight to make sure that it was installed correctly and to make sure that it has not deteriorated. I will also check out the rubber gaskets around the frame of the skylight to make sure that they are not compromised. This is often the cause of skylight leaks on older skylights. If it all checks out, then we've just ruled out the skylight as the source. Then we move to phase 2. I'll start testing the roof area above and around the skylight, working systematically upslope. I'm looking at the shingles, the valleys, any penetrations like vents or pipes. Again, we're doing this methodically, one section at a time. Here's where thermal imaging becomes invaluable. And this is technology that most contractors simply don't invest in. Thermal imaging cameras reveal moisture travel patterns that are completely invisible to the naked eye. I can see exactly where water is moving through the roof structure, even when it's not actively dripping. The moisture shows up as temperature differences in the building materials, creating a roadmap where water has been traveling. I'll be honest with you, most contractors skip this diagnostic step entirely. It takes time. It requires getting into your attic during an active leak or shortly after rain. And it means they might have to tell you that the expensive skylight replacement they wanted to sell you isn't actually necessary. But this is a thorough way to trace the water path backward to find the real source and avoid wasting money on the wrong repair. The difference between a proper diagnosis and guesswork can literally be thousands of dollars and months of ongoing damage to your home. This is why I always tell homeowners, don't let anyone sell you a solution until they've proven where the water is actually coming from. Skylight-specific failures versus roof failures near skylights. Now that you understand how to properly diagnose the source, let's talk about what you're actually looking for. The key thing to understand is that skylight leaks and roof leaks near skylights require completely different solutions and have vastly different costs. When skylights actually do leak, there are 4 main culprits. The most common is flashing failure at the upslope side of the skylight. The flashing is the metal or waterproof material that creates a seal between your skylight and your roof. And the upslope side takes the most water flow. So that's where failures typically occur first. Over time, the sealant degrades, the metal corrodes, or the flashing simply wasn't installed correctly in the first place. The second skylight-specific issue is what looks like a leak but actually isn't. Condensation on the interior of the skylight. This happens when you have a ventilation issue in your home. Warm, moist air rises and hits the cold glass of the skylight, creating condensation that drips down, just like a leak would. Homeowners see water dripping from their skylight and immediately assume it's leaking from the outside, but it's actually a humidity and ventilation problem inside your home. Third, you might have a cracked dome. This is more common with older acrylic skylights that have been exposed to UV rays and temperature fluctuations for years. The material becomes brittle and develops cracks that let water in. And fourth is seal failure around the frame itself. The gaskets and seals that hold the skylight to the curb can deteriorate over time, especially if the skylight wasn't installed with proper attention to the manufacturer's specifications. But here's what I see more often: roof issues masquerading as skylight problems. The most common is inadequate cricket installation above the skylight on older self-flashed skylights. A cricket is a small peaked structure that diverts water around the skylight rather than letting it dam up behind it. When there's no cricket, or when it's too small, water accumulates on the upslope side of the skylight and eventually finds its way in, not through the skylight itself, but through the roof structure around it. Another frequent issue is damaged shingles on the slope above the skylight. Maybe a tree branch fell during a storm, or maybe the shingles in that area are just older and have lost their integrity. Water gets under those damaged shingles and travels down to emerge near the skylight. And then there is valley failure. If your skylight is near a roof valley where 2 roof planes meet and that valley isn't properly installed or the shingles are failing, you've got a channel directing water straight toward your skylight area. The difference between these scenarios is critical because they require completely different solutions. Fixing skylight flashing is a targeted repair. Addressing a roof issue above the skylight might mean replacing a section of shingles or building a cricket. These are different skill sets, different materials, and different costs. The real cost of guessing wrong. Let's talk about the financial impact of misdiagnosing your leak, because this is where homeowners really get hurt. Skylight reflashing typically runs between $600 and $900. It's a targeted repair that addresses roof to skylight problems. A full skylight replacement, on the other hand, runs between $1,500 and $2,500, depending on the size and type of the skylight you're installing. But if the real problem is a roof repair above the skylight, maybe it's damaged shingles or a failed valley, you're looking at $400 to possibly over $1,000 for that repair. Think about what happens when you guess wrong. You spend $1,500 replacing a perfectly good skylight, and 3 weeks later, you're still seeing water because the actual roof leak 6 feet away is still there. Now you're out $1,500 and you still need to spend another $400 or more to fix the real problem. But here's what makes this even worse. While you're dealing with the wrong repair, the real leak continues causing damage. Unaddressed leaks don't just stay static. Water that's getting into your roof structure is causing ongoing damage every single time it rains. According to research on water intrusion damage, unaddressed leaks lead to ruined drywall, paint damage, and potential mold growth. These are health hazards that extend beyond just structural damage. I've seen cases where moisture stays hidden in the framing for weeks, creating rust on fasteners and deterioration in the wood that compounds the repair costs. What starts as a $600 roof repair turned into an expensive remediation project because the homeowner spent months chasing the wrong solution while the real leak kept destroying their home. This is why proper diagnosis isn't just about saving money on the current repair. It's about investment protection. It's about preventing the cascade of damage that happens when water keeps finding its way into your home structure. Your home is your family's biggest investment, and protecting it starts with knowing exactly what you're dealing with before you spend a single dollar on repairs. The important thing to remember is that when it comes to water intrusion, assumptions are expensive. The obvious answer: water near the skylight means the skylight is leaking. is usually wrong. Don't let anyone sell you a solution until they've proven where the water is actually coming from. A proper diagnostic process might cost you a few $100s up front, but it can save you thousands in unnecessary repairs and prevent long-term damage to your home. To put it simply, water is deceptive. Most leaks aren't where they appear to be, and proper diagnosis with systematic testing is the only way to avoid expensive mistakes. The diagnostic process we covered today, isolating the skylight with water testing, checking the attic during active leaks, using thermal imaging to trace moisture patterns, this is what separates professional leak detection from expensive guesswork. Remember the 4 main skylight-specific issues: flashing failure at the upslope side, condensation from ventilation problems, cracked domes, and seal failure around the frame. And remember the 3 main roof issues that masquerade as skylight leaks: inadequate cricket installation, damaged shingles above the skylight, and valley failures channeling water toward the skylight. But here's something most homeowners don't realize. Even when you do find the real source of your leak, the repair techniques used determine whether your fix will last 2 years or 20 years. The difference between a temporary patch and a permanent solution comes down to proper flashing techniques, quality materials, and installation methods that many contractors simply don't follow. Remember, the right diagnosis can save you a lot of time, money, and frustration. If you want to avoid costly repairs, make sure to get a professional assessment before jumping into any major fixes. For more expert tips and solutions, check out the link below, and I'll see you in the next video.